Welcome everyone to the CBT Nuggets VMworld 2020 Tech Panel. Today we're going to be talking with 3 CBT Nuggets trainers about the tech and certification announcements coming from VMware this year. Today's tech panel is being recorded, so if you miss anything or you want to share it with your friends and colleagues, it will be available on the CBT Nuggets blog at cbtnuggets.com/blog shortly. All right, so we have 3 amazing CBT Nuggets trainers with us today. Up first, we have Jacob Moran, our virtualization expert. He's also the instructor on many of our VMware courses. We have Bart Castle, who is our cloud instructor, AWS expert supreme, and he has a very fancy hat on. And we have Keith Barker, 2-time CCIE, the OG of IT, our networking guru. How's it going, everybody?
Great.
Looking good. Hey, hello.
Feeling great. Glad to be here.
Hey, guys. And if you are watching live, please toss your questions about VMware, VMworld, and any questions for our trainers in the Q&A module in that questions block right down there. We will be addressing as many questions as we can throughout, and towards the end, we will have a Q&A lightning round. We hope to be able to get to as many questions as we can, but if there's a ton, there's no guarantee we're going to get to all of them, so sorry about that up front, but we do want to get into it. So let's get started. Jacob, you were attending all of VMworld 2020. Is there anything that stood out to you from the announcements recently that you'd like to talk about with the VMware technologies?
Sure. Yeah, love to. So one of the big things that was kind of unveiled and more was explained about was Project Monterey. And VMware has these projects, right? And they have these cool code names, and it's fun to go through them. Back in 2019, where I got this shirt, the projects that they were excited about were Project Pacific, which was all about the re-engineering of Kubernetes into the underlying infrastructure of vSphere, being able to have your virtualization engine itself be managed as basically using the type of developer language that is associated with Kubernetes, and then being able to have the management of it be very consistent. You can manage whole applications and all the different pieces as a single unit. It's very cool. And so we see that in vSphere 7 as a realization of that. And so vSphere 7's out, and we're excited about that. Then Project Tanzu was also back in 2019. This was a release, and this was all about it's kind of a collection of services that are very much designed for building on the Project Pacific, the Kubernetes integration, and being able to have a lot of self-service deployments of these applications, being able to separate out the application model from the infrastructure, package management, just essentially a lot of the things that were needed for app-focused virtualization, which is the world we live in now, right? Very much infrastructure has been, as we integrate more with cloud environments, has been focused on being more and more separated out from the application model, and so that we're trying to think less about infrastructure over and over again. So now we get to Monterey, and Monterey suddenly is taking this shift into hardware focus. It's all about, as we have more of a concern about being able to dynamically support these huge workloads, how are we going to do that? And so there's this integration that we now have with this new technology called the Smart NIC. And one of the most exciting things in this new model for ESXi deployment is literally having this processor that's on this network interface card that's being produced by some of the major vendors, coming out and literally having ESXi reside on the NIC. And then from there, that becomes a deployment model for ESXi to then be run on top of that as a deployment, or a bare metal installation to be run on that. It's about being able to have out-of-band management, virtualized device functionality that ends up being seamless, and reducing a lot of the standard workloads that kind of drain how much CPU and memory access you normally have, and being able to reassign that to this low-level hardware where it can perform at just this base level really fast, and then then it's just, the VMs and apps running in this higher level space, so much cleaner. So Monterey, hardware focus, very exciting to see this shift, because it's going to, a lot of the frustrations, so often what an announcement is we saw this bottleneck and now we're showing you how we're going to, get past it. And that's what it is.
Yeah, I love that, Jacob. That's awesome, man.
Well, yeah, that's really cool to hear. Bart, you're definitely deep in that cloud space. Is there anything out of that stuff that stands out to you as like, oh, this could be a tool that I could pick up and use right away?
Sure. Well, to kind of to jump off of what Jacob was saying about Monterey there, when I was approaching VMworld 2020 here, I was kind of coming from this AWS cloud provider centric view of things. And one of the big options that AWS came out with a few years ago is this concept of running bare metal. And so when you hear VMware going at this and saying, we want to find a better way to enrich the bare metal offerings that cloud service providers and carrier service providers offer out there, this is a really big win, because it allows us to change the way they deliver services, the way they manage resources for the services that they're delivering. And it just generally makes more power available in a targeted fashion for whatever supplementary systems they want, whether that be for architecting for storage, architecting for latency, architecting for application performance. And of course, for me, anytime we get into talking about performance and cloud and realization, there's really three big constraints. We're talking speed, scale, and security. And so, Monterey that Jacob's talking about there is really a perfect example of how the infrastructure and the way that we use it needs to level up to be able to take advantage of this next generation cloud era. So kind of thinking a little bit ahead on here too, we see that VMware on Azure is completely GA as of 2020 this year, which is really exciting, because that brings the three big cloud providers here in the United States fully under VMware's management umbrella. And on top of that, Tanzu, which is the Kubernetes management offering as well, now able to bridge across those. AWS support announced this year as well. Very exciting. And I think a lot of people talk about Kubernetes in a lot of different ways. And for me, the story of Kubernetes is really similar to the story of VMware as well. It is about maximizing control and operational management levels for teams that don't necessarily have this cloud native world in mind. And so I work with a lot of cloud native organizations, but seeing Tanzu being available on AWS now means that they can scale Kubernetes clusters across different cloud providers, on-prem, and across these big public service providers as well, which again is all about being able to embrace change and being able to embrace the use of the infrastructure so they can meet those needs like speed, security, and scale. So kind of thinking back to some of that as well, if some of you might not be familiar with the SmartNIC idea, if you think of the way that line cards took off some of the burden from big chassis carrier switches, it's a very similar concept where you're dividing and conquering the workload. Very exciting stuff. And looking at some of the other announcements that VMware made this year, like Edge Network Intelligence, some of the artificial intelligence pieces that they're adding into their threat prevention pieces as well. Very exciting, because these require taking workloads closer to where the data is entering the infrastructure itself, which kind of plays right into the concept of hybrid cloud and distributed architectures. So if you're going to have systems generating data that's of interest to you far out on the edge, closer to customers, removed from your data centers in this this disaggregated concept that they kind of introduce here, you have to have the right types of workloads and a place to run them. So again, the SmartNIC comes into play here as you look at telcos creating 5G networks. They need infrastructure that they can run in those points of presence around the world to deliver those sorts of services. The other things I thought were interesting, they added some of the vRealize management suite for VMware. Really important layer for me. And I don't know, maybe Jacob and Keith, maybe you can kind of echo some of this. Whenever I look at a reoccurring theme all across computing technology, it's about the integration layer. There's always some important integration layer that has to exist there. And looking at vRealize, it's a great layer for management, but also being able to optimize and tune these workloads. Because if you're going to be a carrier trying to deliver next-gen 5G cloud-style services at the edge, in the data center, and in the private environment, and in public clouds, you're not going to be able to do it all just with your well-equipped network operations team. You need AI and ML on your side to be able to do this. And when you think analytics, you got to capture the data, you got to analyze it before you can take action on it. So pushing all of this power out to the edge makes it that much more robust for us. And I don't know, Keith, maybe does that help us solve some of our security problems that we're running into out there?
It does. In fact, when you said speed, scale, and security, the thing that I pay attention to is security. Like as a engineer, I want the traffic to flow and everything to work, but I ultimately care about security. And so we have, macro segmentation and micro segmentation, and basically Carbon Black, which VMware acquired, last year. It's amazing. I mean, it's an amazing product. And you might think, well, how, why do we need something like that? Well, back in like the 80s, I know I'm dating myself here, but back in the 80s, I was introduced to my first virus. And it was propagated, if you're young, you may not know what this is, but a 3.5-inch floppy. It's that icon that looks like a save button in your interface. Anyway, it was propagated as a boot sector virus on a floppy. And I was at Blue Cross of California in the 80s as an IT person there. And we were talking to this company called a virus protection company. Like, they were brand new. And working with the CEO of one of those huge companies at the time is who we were talking with, like a 2-person operation. Anyway, long story short, guess what? In the last 30 years, 28 years, it's gotten a lot worse. And so we have endpoints. Now, what is an endpoint? Is it like a PC, a Mac, a Linux box, a server? Yes. Is it Kubernetes? Yes. Is it the end of an API? Yes. The attack surface is just huge. And so we need some tools that can be used to identify a lot of, like, if you're in a SOC, a security operations center, you need to be aware of the alerts that are happening. If you're a hunter, you're looking for these threats and vulnerabilities, you need to be able to go in and take a look. Oh, that was PowerShell, and it launched this, and it tried to encrypt it, and then it activated the network adapter, it tried to send traffic, encrypted. For investigation, all that data needs to be available. So the only way to really pull that off is to have some comprehensive way of doing that. Now, Cisco has AMP, the advanced malware protection that they've tried to tuck in everywhere. And it's a good product, no doubt. But you know what? Carbon Black rocks. And the cool thing is, guess what? VMware, they're already doing VMs, right? And so they have VMware tools, which most people are familiar with. They can integrate that and are integrating that into VMware tools. So if you're remote desktop in or using VDI, all that inspection, you don't have to have this bloaty, hey, I'm a client or agent that's gonna do anti-malware, and I'm bigger than your operating system. Well, with Microsoft, that's hard to do. But so anyway, they can integrate that into vSphere, in the vCenter, into ESXi, into the hypervisor itself, part of the VMware tools, and then all that data can be, in the cloud as security intelligence, which is required. And it's not just one company; it's all that data going to the cloud. And then for the people who really need the forensics, they can go in and look at those traffic patterns and see it, and then they can set up rules with Carbon Black to go ahead and implement that. So I'm excited. Now, I'm excited for any vendor who can really pull it off. And so the key is, if somebody's going to go buy something, I would say test it out and verify that it works. Because unfortunately, we have to stay ahead of the curve with attacks. And things like AMP from Cisco and things like Carbon Black from VMware, those are great tools to see the initial threats, and before they actually get to your network and start harming you, to put up the defenses. So that might be a little more than my time slot, but Carbon Black, great tool, and now that it's integrated with VMware, even better.
No. Keith, aren't there some serverless elements or some agentless elements to some of those security offerings too? I feel like the integration with the gateways was something I had heard about throughout this as well.
Yeah, if we have VMs,
yeah.
Yep. So basically, anywhere there's think of this. Like, imagine you have a hypervisor that's in charge of a VM, right? The whole thing. You could slip in that piece that could have very little or almost no impact on the system and get all that intelligence. So the idea of zero impact, I don't know if that's totally true, but tight integration everywhere is fantastic. And that way, any kind of container, app, endpoint, it can all be monitored with very low impact and get the data to where it needs to be, so that as a system, if you're in the SOC, you can say, oh, here's these alerts. Or as I mentioned earlier, if you need to investigate, okay, this PowerShell is spawning off this, and this is happening on our network. I don't know if it's a threat, but you can start analyzing it with those tools because you have it every part of the network and every device. All that data is coming in. So, Bart, I don't know if that answered your question or not, but I'm still excited about, whether it's not as bloaty as many other solutions, and it's tightly integrated because it's VMware, and they've been dealing with virtualization like forever.
Now, Keith, you did mention that it's good to get hands-on with something like Carbon Black, right?
Yeah.
If I remember right, VMware did say that they're putting out a pretty substantial free trial. Can you get into that a little bit?
Yeah, if you've got a 6.5 vSphere environment, so ESXi is our host, and to manage them as a group, you have vSphere, vCenter that manage them. So if you have, I think they're splitting 6.5. I believe the details were a 6-month free trial, no holds barred, of Carbon Black, which will give you a good opportunity to get it in there, see its usefulness, which is a pretty risk-free way if you have a VMware environment of doing it. Now, somebody who's not running VMware at all, this is not a huge deal because Carbon Black's been out there already. But if somebody who has VMware and you just want to increase your infrastructure security and your visibility to virtually everything, it'd almost be a shame not to try it out, especially as a free trial. Now, if you're going to do it, just like everything in IT, lab it up, go through change control, make sure that you're not going to introduce something that's going to harm your business. But if you test it out and verify it, rolling it out would make a lot of sense for most companies who are running VMware.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially if you happen to be working with the NSX product and you're already invested in the network layer and how that's moving, and then also the virtualization infrastructure, you're going to see so many data points. And like you said, Keith, when you put that into production, you may find a new level of insight into what kind of traffic patterns are going on securely or insecurely that you may not be aware of. So it's those kind of things are always so eye-opening, and definitely an adventure worth bringing a whole team in on.
And I saw a report, it was like 2 months ago, it said on average, people who had a compromise in their networks, on average, companies were 15% of the time notified by somebody else. Not even their internal, so let's imagine we have 15 different solutions for, anti-malware, and we're trying to manage it all. Just like a credit, this is kind of an older example, but when Target got smashed, it was the government that said, hey, all these credit card companies are reporting that you are the common denominator in all these compromises. And so with malware and attacks, it'd be a shame. And 15% of the time, it's like somebody outside of the company, outside of your own AV and antivirus, anti-malware system, that's saying, hey, we've got a problem. And again, the visibility and the integration on all the pieces is going to help to identify, like you said, identify that it's happening.
Yeah, and I'm sure we can just expect our footprints to get smaller and less complex, right? So that'll be
Drop the sarcasm bomb.
Well, some people are doing more and more VDI, true, right? Where you're just locking everything down. Just the app that comes is like, here's the challenge. We have a thing called the internet, and we have a thing called browsers. And if you allow a user to go out to a website, that is an attack surface that's a risk. And so the more we can lock that down, whether it's through VDI or some other type of controls, the better. But humans and weak systems, like applications that are written poorly, ports that are left open. I had this port that was open for XYZ. You got rid of that solution. You left the port open. Those are the types of things that happen. And anything we can do to build a security posture like a fortress is a good idea.
Well, that brings up a good question, too. A question for Jacob. I saw a couple of things come out about last lines, artificial intelligence, and integrated threat prevention for the NSX virtual switching suite, as well as the Antrea container networking suite that's coming out for NSXT to support advanced cluster support, both from an administration and container level function. Does this, I see this kind of like homogenization happening in the types of work that we might be doing. Are we losing firewall specialists as a result of this integration? Is that shifting? What do you think? Because I know I see that in the cloud space. People constantly asking me, am I losing my cheese? Did the cheese move? Am I able to see the cheese? What do you think? You're saying that integration's good, but from a job role perspective.
Right. From a job role perspective, there is, I do think that where in the past there was more of a firewall specialist, now there's so many places, endpoint protection, perimeter protection, microsegmentation, doing things, kind of as an underlayer before you even get to a particular endpoint. Understanding both the rules-based processes that we kind of have in a classic firewall situation, and then the transference to the intelligence-based model, the AI models that are looking at a dynamic collection of information. I see that applying to pretty much it's kind of like Keith was talking about how, like, all these things are great, but if you don't have security, then we're going to be out of a job anyway, so what's the point? Everyone is needing to really have some understanding of these firewall rules and how they're going to apply to their environment. But one of the things that I love is I'm seeing more and more solutions that are all about gathering the real-time data of what a network looks like in a normal mode, and then being able to turn that into a set of rules that you can then lock down, and that has made the process easier. But then the flip side of that is, do people, where you used to handcraft every rule, right? Artisan firewalls. Now we have this more mass-produced product which rolls things out faster, but are there weak spots that were included and weren't recognized, or were there, is there an understanding when things aren't working correctly as to how we got there? It still becomes a part of it. So deep understanding of rules, I do think, is important. Yeah, Keith?
So I was going to say the telemetry too, the ability with this enterprise integrated solution is that you can go back and say, okay, what happened? Like this PowerShell commandlet ran, and it invoked these two processes, and you can track that based on a hash, and you can see then everywhere in your enterprise, oh my gosh, this is happening everywhere. And that alert can come up, and then a human can get involved and say, wow, that's an alert, let's investigate that, or send it over to a team that can, and say, yeah, this is not normal behavior. And then guess what? Then we can set the policy for that rule saying, shut that down. And then everywhere, because the hypervisor is involved in these activities, and the VMware tools has the agent built into it, you can very easily see where it's going and stop it almost immediately by identifying that something abnormal is happening. But I agree with you that if we have total AI and it says, oh, this is happening, and just automatically creates rules, we may stop our users from using really risky apps like spreadsheets and stuff like that. So I'm with you.
We talk a lot in some of the AI spaces in kind of the cloud world about, okay, so these systems are particularly good at identifying anomalies against baselines that they've established. But you still have to feed your pets, right? And if you don't feed them the right data and provide the right information, then they're at a loss for being able to make those decisions or identify the anomalies that are really valuable to you. And of course, there's always prioritization. As an enterprise, you got your priorities, but if you're a service provider, you're talking about an entirely different tiering system of quality that you might be delivering, that now you're not only looking for threats, but now you're prioritizing based on other contexts that are definitely outside the scope of what the AI engines are designed to train for originally. And we can look at packets, but we don't know who they belong to from a customer's perspective, or maybe a regional piece, until Jacob applies some of that logic on top of it. And one little update I wanted to shout out about here too, they talked about cloud web security. This is the Secure Access Service Edge, is another one of those really important edge prevention systems, where we think kind of like the cocoon and the onion model there, where if we can identify and prevent these accidents from occurring out at the edge, then that protects our core network, our even more important resources, and of course ensures that we get the right service levels that we're looking for there as well. So excited to see that intelligent firewalling embracing this cloud era, and of course the edge networks being robust and able to be able to do it at the right speed as well.
There's so much tech stuff that came out of this. Obviously there's a lot of cross utilization here, because we're talking about the expansion, like you're talking about, Keith. This is all expanding the attack surface, but at the same time there's awareness about like having to be more secure on top of it. So it's great to see how all of these different pieces talk to each other. Like, let's go ahead and round it up. Is there anything, like, we didn't really get into the workspace security remote? The Carbon Black workload stuff is also a deeper piece on top of the Carbon Black structure, the zero trust network access inside of the SASE solution. There's just so much stuff. Is there anything that you guys, any other tech piece that you guys want to talk about before we move on to certifications and exams and the changes that go along with that?
I just have one little piece, and that is any solution that we're going to do for security, it cannot rely on just in-house or what our own brains. Even if we're a huge company and we have a huge security team, it's going to require outside intelligence that's correlating and taking data from other sensors. Basically, that's a fancy way of saying other people's data and information, so that we can, Bart, feed our pets, right? They can give our system not just what we know, but what the community knows, and use all that information to make the best possible decisions. And I think that's whatever solution is implemented. If it's in a bubble, like one vendor with their ideas without outside input or community, it's going to be limited to finding some of those attacks. So most of the big solutions include that community and security intelligence from the cloud, but that's a critical step that I wanted to add regarding whatever security solution we use.
Yeah, like the CVEs and some of the other real-time anomaly listings. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Those are important trends and fingerprints that this level of sophistication that VMware is driving with these changes makes it available within a usability range.
Great. Thank you guys so much. Now, there were some certification and exam changes also announced recently for VMware. Jacob, do you want to start us off by talking about kind of some of the certification changes as well as what the exam policies are that have changed with VMware?
Sure. I mean, some things are, so if you've encountered VMware the exam model in the past, there's the current exams are identified by year. So we've got, like, for example, VCP 2020. So, that's just naming conventions, the fact that they're changing that a little bit and kind of tracking with that. So we'll see how that continues. How sometimes companies will come up with a model and then decide, oh, it's Tuesday, let's change it again. But for now, it's defined by those years. We have different levels. So you have an associate level, which for many of the different areas, such as data center management, standard kind of virtualization things. And that associate level doesn't require anything other than learning what you need to know, taking the exam, voila, you get certified. However you choose to do that. And then you have the professional level exam, which is kind of the working professional model. And in the past, I would say that the associate level, that really base level, was almost more of a marketing approach. Understand really just the concepts and terms, and they've really shifted that to include some basic level hands-on things in a way that they didn't in years past. And then the professional level really stepping on that platform of hands-on and adding more in-depth and more difficult, more challenging solutions-based models, right? Problem solution, understanding the right way to apply the right tool to a particular concept. And then there's a couple of tiers that go to more advanced professional and to a design certification as well. At that professional level, VMware does still have the requirement of your first professional exam. You do need to take an official VMware course. That's one of the things that's they have their own kind of inside track to. There's actually several different courses you can take, whether that's a network professional beginning or a data center virtualization professional beginning, whatever that is, a course is required, and then you can go take the test. And then if you go to, let's say, start off with data center virtualization and then move over to network virtualization, you don't have to take another course because you've already taken that first one. So that's something that sometimes people get confused about. They think they've got to take a course for every one of those directly through VMware, and that's actually not the case. One of the other things that has been just went through a rapid fire of adjusting to versions, like different versions come out. The current 2020 model is based upon vSphere 6.7. So 7.0 has come out, but that's not what the exam is based on currently, if you're trying to figure out what to get in your head. And in the world of network virtualization, which is another huge topic for us, the VMware had two flagship products called NSX-V, which was tightly associated with the vSphere hypervisor, and then NSX-T for Transform, which was associated with both vSphere and being able to run in a Red Hat environment, or not Red Hat specifically, but a Linux-based environment and use KVM. And also was designed to integrate with vSphere Cloud and to integrate with that model. So -V has been phased out. And so -T is the product now at this point, and their certification model reflects that. It's at currently in the 3.0 tier if you were to get the latest, greatest version, but the certification is still based on 2.4. So again, always check with that. I've just seen a lot of flux, a lot of movement in the certification arena because just like everyone else, right? Products are being released faster. There's a faster development cycle going on for VMware, just like there is for everyone else in the industry. And that means that, jump in whenever you can and learn what you can, and then go from there, build from there. So that's kind of the first blush.
That's awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. And did I read correctly? This was an earlier announcement in the year, but VMware also did open up remote exam options for a lot of their certifications, right?
Yeah. Back in April, they started working in conjunction with Pearson VUE to make sure that you could have at-home remote exams because of the concern for safety and COVID and things like that. So it's got. I mean, they've got AI built into that. They're monitoring you, looking at all sorts of things. They've got a whole setup that you go through. But yeah, basically you can go through an online model to take those exams, and they have not. They haven't put an expiration date on that at this point. It's very exciting.
I want to comment on the online exam experience. So
Yeah.
I've taken a few, actually I've probably taken over 200 exams over the last 10, 15 years at physical locations. It's a joy. You prep, you study, you lab, if you pray if that's the way you want to do it. But you show up on time, you go in, they check you in, they give you a laminated piece of paper and a dry erase marker so you can actually, okay, I've got this hypervisor and I've got these 3 VMs and this is my NIC, and you can draw stuff out if you need to or make notes during the exam to think a question through. Well, guess what? Online exams, you can't have any writing materials with you. So they take a picture of your desk from all 4 angles, and they do a whole bunch of other tests to make sure that, one screen, one monitor. And then, but the key is they give you a little Pearson, or it's a VUE whiteboard in the exam. And the tip I want to share with everybody is that you can go to Pearson's site or VUE site, and they have a web page where you can practice with it. And that way...
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah, it's like, I wonder what the whiteboard's going to be like. Can I really write? So basically you can draw. If you have a tablet... Now, actually, in the early days, like April, when I did this, I had a touchscreen, and I could use my finger on it. But since then, the documentation says no fingers. Can't touch your screen. But you can use a mouse, and you can use your keyboard. So you can have text, you can draw, you can make a box, a rectangle, you can color it. Like, I was thinking, who's going to take time to color code the rectangles?
I know,
but,
right?
But that tool is handy, and if you do I'll do a plug for my social media right now. My name is Keith Barker. I've got a short video on just how to do that. That way you can practice with it, and that's an important skill because
that's awesome.
It's not comfortable when you show up for that exam. You're all nervous, right? You're in they're watching you from the camera, and like, how is that tool going to work? That way you can practice with it beforehand.
That's funny. I didn't even realize that was there until like the 3rd test I took this year virtually. I was like, oh, there's a whiteboard up here. I can make notes in here as I'm going along.
Yep. And it keeps it between questions too, so you can make a note and then minimize it and bring it back. It's the same whiteboard with your same notes. So in case you wanted to type in your name, like, I forgot my name, I'm so nervous, you put your name there, check it 100 times.
Great tip. Thank you, Keith.
Yeah.
Definitely get your space ready too. They gave me a hard time about some of what I tried to fly as my testing space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's definitely a trade-off between that
Too many ukuleles.
in-person testing and that online testing for sure. So it's good to know what those differences are, especially as we all adjust to the online and remote testing options. So if it's all right with you guys, we want to jump over. We have a pile of questions from our community, from people here in chat, and we'll just jump right into it if that's okay with you.
Sweet, bring them on.
All right. Let's see here. First question. Let's go to Jacob with a K W. This is a question from one of our GoToWebinar registries. Is vSan the best option for Horizon? And I'm going to toss that one over to Jacob.
Is vSan the best solution for Horizon? So, virtual SAN, which is a hyperconverged model of taking local drives on your ESXi platforms and getting them to function as if it was an external unit, a standard SAN, right? It's a way to put that all in the same stack, has its own built-in methods of providing coverage and things like that. And then you've got Horizon, which is all about delivering VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure, and being able to have your desktops be connected to remotely, display remotely, maybe display apps, and build in that app model. Okay, so that's our background. So for there's a lot to unpack for that question. So then the question is that the best thing? I love vSANs because they enable a level of localized functionality that can be very, very powerful because you're literally on the system, right? It's a local stack. You're not having to go across remote network access. You lose out on some of the high-end functionality that you can get in a storage area network appliance, right? You're not getting those features and functionality and security and those kind of things because you're essentially going to almost an internal JBOD for that you're converting into a localized virtualized SAN. So there's a trade-off, and it's really designed as a mid-market tool, but it really does integrate well with Horizon, where you're not dealing with where the type of workload that you're dealing with is often very the localized disk access typically is very minimal. And so that type of functionality where your external storage area network might be used for what your servers are connecting to, that your endpoints of Horizon endpoints are connecting to. So bottom line is, yes, it is a very effective tool. Is it always the best tool? Not necessarily, but I really like it, and it does have a very fast disk access that is very efficient for the type of workload that you're dealing with there. So if you haven't looked into it, I would totally dive into that as a very powerful option. It's designed with that synergy in mind. And VMware has actually a really great white paper on that specific subject.
Excellent.
I'm a fan, by the way. Yeah, I'm a fan of vSAN. I've got these 4 servers back here, and I don't need vSAN, but I got to tell you, Jacob, I put it on there. It's amazing. I agree with you.
It's
just
magic.
like it's this data store that's just created out of these, disks that they're all participating to, so we can kind of share the load. So I'm a fan.
Okay. Well, next question, actually, Keith, this is one for you.
Okay.
Can we expect more SD-WAN interoperations between VMware and Cisco APIs?
That's a great question. I don't know. Now, I know Cisco's SD-WAN pretty well. I don't know VMware's SD-WAN, except that they have one. Sorry, Jacob. I'm so sorry. Because I know they probably have a pretty good solution. So as far as the integration, I do not have any insights to that.
Well, then redirect to Jacob. Jacob, have you seen anything coming up in that space for interoperations?
So I looked away for a second here. The question specifically was what? Can we redirect snapshots?
No.
Can we expect more SD-WAN interoperations between VMware and Cisco APIs?
VMware and what was it called? VeloCloud have an interoperation that they're working with. So that purchase, and kind of like just with Carbon Black, same kind of thing. As you get that integration, then the whole model of APIs that go along with that kind of fall into place afterwards. So I would say, without knowing a ton about the specifics of it, yes.
I love you,
Okay.
Jacob.
And a
thank-
few of these other questions are definitely for the group, because I think there's a piece that each of you could apply to these. So the next one comes from Shariar R, who's here watching right now. Can you guys talk a little bit about the cloud-based VMware security options? And I know that you got into it a little bit, but if there's anything specific that you really want to highlight there, that'd be a good one.
Bart, start us off.
Sure.
Cloud
Well,
Bart.
yeah. Well, whenever you get into talking about virtualized security devices, there's really kind of two different layers. You're thinking like virtualized network functions, and then the security that you can provide for those functions. So a virtualized router is secured a little differently than a hardware appliance would. So one of the things that I think VMware has done a really good job of here is positioning solutions like Virtual Cloud Foundation, their VCF platform, which is really kind of an extension of vSphere to support cloud-based workloads and also interoperate with other cloud vendors out there. It makes it possible to virtualize more of the security functions that we had before. So you can take and run existing VMware security solutions in different locations. So that in and of itself says that while we might want to find a new tool that's designed for the cloud, the real value comes from being able to take the existing tools that we already have well integrated and managed and make them available via cloud services. And also keep in mind too, when we say that it's for the cloud, we really mean it's network attached. It offers managed abilities. It offers on-demand and flexible pricing options. And the only question then has to do with who's paying for and how are you purchasing the infrastructure that's actually delivering it. So when you see things like cloud web security, there's secure access services edge component, which is really kind of a comprehensive layer 2 through 7 security suite. You're talking about taking a lot of other security services that used to exist elsewhere on different devices and combining them together, because we now have power like things like SmartNICs that can do that sort of complexity, keep workloads separated, and still perform line speed interactions almost anywhere within the network. Or so that is the goal. And when we add things like 5G in there, then we do have the ability to go even farther with the actual transmission speeds. So I would point out that part of what VMware's tried to do here is make sure that the tools they have available already, the integrated pieces, are expendable or extensible through things like Carbon Black for endpoints, Carbon Black for workloads, and also being able to provide options where you don't need agents to interact with the compute resources on the systems. You can do it more intelligently at the NICs, at the I/O points where the traffic is actually moving. And for me, that's what really speaks to some of the cloud sophistication. And I'll punt it back over to you guys as just a primer there.
That's awesome. I don't have anything to add to that.
Well, you got to be aware of the new thing. It's not always new. It's sometimes about making those existing tools work better in these different environments.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that, as I've been working more with NSX-T recently, is you have hypervisor-driven elements, you have virtual device elements, you have the ability to hand off to say, okay, if a certain rule applies, if you pass these rules, then or a certain thing is triggered, then kick it off to another service. And so the ability for VMware to both have its own security related services that work both at the data center and in the cloud and in the handoff between those two environments, and then the ability to hand that off to a third party security solution, is part of what allows that to be crazy flexible depending on what you've already invested in.
And we have like web services and APIs to thank for a lot of that interoperability between those.
Right on.
Excellent. Okay, so another technical question, and Jacob, I think you might have started alluding to this one earlier. Can you redirect VM snapshots to alternative storage?
Yeah. Short answer is that is programmable. It's not something that is obvious on the front end, and VMware actually does have knowledge base articles on specifically how to do that. So that is something that's been available for a while, and it's a technology that it's a solution that's very useful if You need to take frequent snapshots for security reasons or other purposes but you don't want to compromise the performance on the disk where you're running locally. So yes, there's an underlying way that you can go in and change what they call an advanced setting. It's kind of like, if you're familiar with the Windows registry, it's kind of the equivalent of that for a vSphere environment, and make that modification. Keith?
I was just saying advanced. That's just having fun with that. Thanks, Jacob.
That question did come to us from Oliver. Thank you, Oliver, for that question. We do have a few. There's still quite a few more. We're going to try and wrap up the technical questions and then jump into the certification and training questions, because I know that you guys get a lot of those. So next one here. This is for you, Bart. I'm being asked to look at the cloud to lift and shift my on-prem environment. I've been presented with VMware on AWS. Any feedback on or thoughts on this solution, or any potential competitors? I want to avoid modifying my workloads in case I want to move them back on premises. And that's from Fabian, who's in the chat right now.
Sure. Well, hey, thanks for the question, Fabian. It's a good one. What I wanted to mention to answer that was, there's a great quote from Pat, is it Gelsinger? Did I say that right? Hope I said that right. VMware CEO. But he was talking about the refactor versus rehost concept, which I think is really wrapped into the question that you're asking there is, why do we consider VMware on AWS? What makes it a viable solution? And we want to remember that it's all about specific types of customers. I mean, you have cloud native people who are going to develop in the cloud, write applications there. They're going to be fat and happy there, just developing directly with that stack of services. But when we look at the effort required to move applications from any data center as they exist, or to consider changing the way that they operate to move into a different environment, there are massive technical implications and cost implications that go along with redesigning or moving those pieces. And as much as I love cloud native, and that's what I spend a lot of my time doing, I recognize that for organizations, often it is not about when you should move, or what you should move, but how you should move, and getting that timing right. And so VMware on AWS, or VMware on Azure, or on Google Cloud, and I believe they have support for IBM and Oracle and some of the others that are available in the background, or at least on the roadmap. I think those offer a really important path for them to make those changes. As far as, is it viable? Yes, you are talking about AWS making bare metal services available. So from a VMware perspective, you're really not compromising. It is just a service provider location change from the VMware's perspective. And I think that's exactly what they were trying to go for there. So in the end, I think if you have management rolled into running VMware infrastructure, and you want to look for a way to operate in different physical locations, or just simply address reliability and performance elements of making another workload available in another region, then running VMware on AWS is a completely transparent transition in most of the scenarios that I've seen it operating in. On top of that, remember, the management being integrated is an incredibly big value proposition. So I definitely encourage you to look at it. As far as other options that are similar to it, most of the other ones involve converting your virtual machines in some way. Even if they support the VMware disk formats, or they can do a good transition, you're still talking about a transformation phase, and that itself is a Pandora's box of complexity and cost. So I think that it's definitely worth entertaining, and I think AWS and VMware have a really strong partnership that's going to continue to grow over the years. I mean, even Pat said that they're talking about rehosting. It's a quarter of the time and an eighth of the cost versus refactoring, or even just moving to the same platform on like AWS EC2. So definitely some really big factors, and that's going to get the C-level execs' attention.
Great. Thank you so much, Bart. Another technical question here. This one is for Jacob and Keith, I believe. It seems like this is kind of your wheelhouse. Can you guys speak a little bit more about the technologies in the VMware environment that incorporate threat intelligence from external sources? And this question comes from Sam.
Go ahead and jump in, Keith.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because you were already on that subject, I think.
Yeah, so I love it. It takes a community of so the idea of a sensor is some device that detects something's happening and analyzes it. So with Carbon Black and other solutions, they can identify something happen and then give you telemetry of where it is and where it's going. It can hash it, identify it at all the places it might show up, and you can investigate to see if it's going badly. So let's imagine that it could be a service provider, but let's imagine we're a huge financial organization doing credit card processing or something else. We really care about attacks and threats. Also, we care about specifics regarding that industry. So by using security intelligence in the cloud with, Carbon Black Cloud services, which are integrated as part of Carbon Black, we can get that information, and from the community and all the other sensors that are feeding it, we can hone in and saying, you know what, we're going to join this community of financial organizations and then pay special attention to what they're seeing and then proactively work on those. So it's impossible to protect yourself without extra data. And so like VMware's big, and Cisco's big, and other vendors that do those types of solutions they all have cloud services and multiple inputs from all their sensors, which is the devices that are collecting data, so they can share that information with the other devices. So using security intelligence, that's my general term for it in the cloud, is critical in order to protect ourselves from near day zero attacks or attacks that are creeping in or starting to look suspicious, to let us know about them ahead of time. And ideally, although this is not realistic, I'm just an optimist, but it's not going to happen. It'd be great if all of our security points, right, regardless of product, if there was some threat and it just automatically rained down the configuration and said, we're going to protect you from this, because there are going to be some false positives. So having the ability to see an alert at like a security operations center at a high level, or be a threat hunter, go into the detail or forensics, and have all the telemetry of where this is going and where it's happening, all that data is important to have, and the group intelligence from all the other sensors that from that vendor or from that coalition of vendors, including CVEs and all the rest, those are an important aspect.
I mean, having a community with these security providers of millions of invested customers that just have that information being conveyed and then redistributed, like that model has so impacted the security levels that we have. And it's scary because even with all that, like the time between intrusion and detection has gone down on average from 2 weeks, 14 days, down to 11 days. That's so nearly 2 weeks, and that's on average, right? And then data breaches were still at like 150 to 200 days before data breaches are detected. So security is huge. Integration is huge. The more invested you are in getting ahead of that, the better you are. So keep looking at that, and like how can I be slapped in the face with this, and how can I get more of a community bringing that information when possible to me, so that those threats are detected quickly.
Stronger together.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Is bringing everybody together to find the solution and using each other's knowledge, and that's what we're doing right now. So that leads to, there's a lot of common questions here. We're not going to ask each of these individually, but they do kind of all wrap up into, everybody likes to talk about new stuff. Where's the bulk of VMware work at? What product, what area role, and how do I get started in learning about it? That's all of you.
Yeah. Yeah. While you have all these things that have changed, certainly data center virtualization and understanding the core foundation of how does a virtual machine work first and foremost allows you to build a baseline to say, oh, now that I understand that virtualization, then I could see how maybe an appliance could be virtualized, like a firewall or a router, something like that. Or I could see how desktops could be virtualized through Horizon, or anything like that. So it really does begin with that. And then if I was going to suggest any one technology that is really, in addition to data center virtualization, that I would want to invest in if I'm personally wanting to know, be able to get the most out of a VMware defined environment, it would actually be vRealize, because vRealize has this power to deal with a lot of automation and a lot of integration with other products, a lot of being able to pull data and give you dashboards of information that are presented cleanly, and it's just been a product that honestly will help you understand your other products better if you haven't already. So that's my first suggestions. What do you guys think?
I was super impressed with everything that I I was reading about vRealize over the last couple of months here. Cloud assembly in particular was interesting to me because the infrastructure as code era is absolutely here. And if we're not familiar with that concept yet, to tee off of what Jacob was saying there, I definitely like to think of boilerplate skills that are going to apply to any technical career. Networking, virtualization, and automation are key there. And in this automation ring, the idea that we can understand what configuration files do in different formats, however human readable they may or may not be, being able to process that information and use it is going to be a really valuable skill in the VMware world, in the emerging data center worlds, and in the emerging cloud spaces that are out there. So looking at infrastructure as code technologies are going to be a key part of it. So I would encourage people to consider parts of that. You don't need to learn to write software necessarily, but you should be comfortable reading some JavaScript, parsing through some YAML files, and understanding what parameterization means and what it means to be a dynamic property-driven system. All of those are going to be great things. The last piece that I always throw out there too is that if you're looking at an educational opportunity with a university or a school, always consider whether or not they offer placement opportunities and certification paths that are going to help you actively seek out, especially if they have relationships with hiring partners out there. I think those are going to be really valuable because you're not just getting the education, you're often getting a push out the door there, like a friendly push out the door off to the people who are going to be landing you. I know that was valuable for me. And people are very sensitive right now to cost versus value for their education. So I think those are key tips I would throw on the pile there.
Those are awesome. I would also say for somebody who's just starting out, it is very, very difficult if you want to configure, like, say, NSX or distributed switches and virtualize routing and switching if you have no clue how routing and switching works. It's really tough to manage Active Directory if it's all sitting on virtualized devices in the cloud if you have no idea about how to manage Active Directory on a standalone server. So I would also say, as far as starting the journey, maybe not get too ahead of the curve there, or too ahead of yourself, in that it would serve you. Now you're talking to the OG of IT here. I have been doing networking like forever. I was alive before ARP. That's a true story, by the way. Now, but it's important to learn those basics of how networking works and how system administration works. And then as we start to virtualize, you can apply those concepts. This is what happened to me about 10 or 15 years ago when I started looking at VMware and virtualization, is that, hey, this is just like, the physical gear, except it's clickety-click, clickety-click. But I know what those checkboxes do and the security ramifications and the functionality. So if you're brand new to the world of IT, maybe start with some basic foundation in networking and system admin. And then as you start virtualizing that, you can just continue to grow because you won't be stopped at, what does a XYZ do? You'll know what that is, and you can actually focus on the virtualization of that.
Those are good primitives to build off of, for sure.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. There's so much good information in there, and I hope that this answers a lot of the questions that people had in chat and came in through the registrations. Now, as we wrap up, I'm going to ask each of you, what are you working on? What course do you want to talk about? And how can people connect with you? So Keith, what are you working on? And how can our learners here connect with you?
Okay, so I am currently finishing up Secure Core for Cisco's CCNP certification. So I know it's a VMware seminar, but we finished NRC, Encore, SD-WAN, Cisco's SD-WAN, sorry, Jacob, and S-Core. They're all fantastic. So if you're looking at the professional level for Cisco, those are great. Also, we have the entry-level stuff too, like CCNA, DevNet Associate. It is a world of automation and APIs these days. If you want to get into that, that's a great way to do it as well. So any one of those courses, and you can find me on social just by searching my name. What's your name? My name is Keith Barker. I come up pretty easy. I'm not the soccer player. If you find me on Google, I'm the one that's not the soccer player. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Keith. And Bart, same question to you, man. What are you working on, and how can our learners connect with you?
Sure. Well, you can find me out there on Twitter at CloudBart, and I am regularly working through AWS certification content right now, wrapping up the associate level certs here for CBT Nuggets, about to release our certified developer for AWS. So I've been working on that. And then also hosting cloud study groups. So if you're ever interested in coming and chatting with me, taking a minute from watching videos, come and join us. You'll find my publishing dates about that out there and on the CBT Nuggets blog as well. I'd love to hear from you. And I always say, if you learn in one cloud vendor, you're learning all of them. A lot of the concepts translate. And to Keith's comment earlier on, I'm talking about primitives and building blocks. I really try to boil what I'm teaching down to those levels so that you can get the most out of what we're training. Even if we're talking AWS, you can translate into VMware Cloud, translate that to Azure. And again, thanks for joining out. Want to give a quick shout out to Sarah too. Congratulations on your cloud practitioner. Nice job.
Great. Thank you, Bart. And finally, Jacob, what's up next for you and how can our learners connect?
So one of the things that we have right now is training on both vSphere 6.5 and 6.7. And right now I'm in the process of just kind of taking that content and then polishing it up a little bit specifically to dial in to create a collection that's very effective at helping people who are studying for the VCP 2020 exam. So looking forward to that being released soon. And then we have an NSX-V course, and again, with that being deprecated, although all the content is really great, up and coming is going to be an NSX-T course, which again dials into this extensible model that works with not just vSphere, but also KVM and VMware Cloud. So a lot of great things coming up there. And you can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn. On Twitter, it's Major Bacon Jacob. Secret. It's an anagram for my name. And yeah, I'd love to chat with anyone who is online as you're trying to figure stuff out. You know, that's what we're all here to do. We're all here because we love helping people get from where they are to where they want to be.
Great. Thank you guys so much. And thanks everyone for joining us for the CBT Nuggets VMworld 2020/VMware Tech Panel. Follow CBT Nuggets on social media for announcements on new training, updates, more events like this. If you missed anything or if you'd like to share this webinar, it will be available on the CBT Nuggets blog at cbtnuggets.com/blog shortly. And so on behalf of Jacob Moran, Bart Castle, Keith Barker, and the entire team at CBT Nuggets, we hope this has been informative for you. And we'd like to thank you for viewing. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Yay.
Adios.
Adios. See you guys.